Thanks for inviting me to participate and moderate this conversation. It sounds like it's going to be really interesting. Actually, I became aware of Laurence Philomene's work, Philomene, sorry, recently when I was in Atlanta visiting with Jennifer Yofi, who's recently published the monograph of puberty, and was really thrilled to learn about it and see it. So let me just start a proper introduction. Laurence Philomene is a non-binary artist from Montreal who creates colorful photographs informed by their lived experiences as a chronically ill transgender person. And their practice celebrates trans existence, and it studies identity as a space in constant flux via highly saturated cinematic and vulnerable images. And you'll notice the power in them is often associated with the color. Let's see, gaining an interest in image making in their teenage years, Laurence has since used photography as a space to both experiment with and document identity as it comes to be expressed through gender, and using photography as a process of mutual and self-care. Their work aims to humanize identities that have been historically marginalized and act as a love letter to their community. Laurence is an honoree of the PDN 30 under 30 and recipient of the Getty Images Creatives in Quarantine Bursary, and also the Lucy Foundation Emerging Artist Scholarship in 2019, and the 2020 Women Photograph Mentorship Program. And their work has been presented in numerous exhibitions and publications worldwide, including solo exhibits in Canada, Germany, France, and Poland. So I think without further ado, I will hand things over to Laurence, and we can start talking about their work and looking at some imagery and having some interesting chat.
Hello everyone. Thank you for coming. So today we're going to talk about my book Puberty. And I don't know, Richard, if you wanted to start or if I should get into it.
Yeah, I think you should just get right into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I also have a list of questions. I'm going to pull that up, but yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting to hear sort of your story. I would love to know kind of biographically, like, you know, how you both got into photography and when you started to transition, and how and when there was an intersection between your creative life and your life, your genderqueer life.
So I started photography when I was about 13, 14. I started by photographing these dolls that I was collecting at the time and sharing them on Flickr. And then from there, I found a community of young photographers who were doing self-portraits, and I was really interested in that. Yeah, so I got into photography as a teenager. I was sharing my work on Flickr. I started with dolls and then started to take self-portraits as well. And I met a lot of other young photographers on there that really inspired me to keep going and to pursue photography as a career. After that, I went to community college for photography. I went for a commercial photography program, even though the work that I do now is mostly personal work and artwork. But yeah, from there, I always maintained a practice of self-portraiture and also a practice of sharing my work online. And I think those two things really went hand in hand for me. After I graduated college, I did a project called Me versus Others, which was a self-portrait project where I was photographing other people, kind of posing as me and looking at identity as a bit of an empty thing and looking at identity as something that could be projected onto others. And the images are really different from my project Puberty. They're a lot more staged and a lot more studio based, which at the time was what my work was for the most part. And then fast forward to 2018, I started taking testosterone in April of 2018. And from the start, I knew that I wanted to document it, but I wasn't really sure how I should go about it. It took me a few months where I was just like keeping it more for myself and yeah, just kind of seeing if like what was going on in my body and if it felt comfortable to me and all of that. And then come December, at the end of the month of December, I gave myself the challenge to take a picture every day, kind of like as a New Year resolution for 2019. And at first it was really just for myself to get in the groove of taking pictures every day. And the challenge that I gave myself was just to take a picture. It doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, and kind of to take that pressure off myself. And what I ended up taking pictures was a lot of self-portraits, and specifically self-portraits of me doing really mundane things around my house. And sharing those pictures on my Instagram. And I got a very positive response. The images were really different from what I had been doing at the time. It was a lot less staged, and the frames were a lot more busy because I was showing like the environment around me. And at first I didn't necessarily think of those images as art because they were so different from my work at the time. But because I was getting such positive response to it whenever I was sharing them, I started to see that maybe it could be something. And then after about 2 months of taking the pictures every day and sharing them with my friends on Instagram, it started to come together as a project. And I knew that I wanted to document my transition this way. And from that point, I kind of knew I wanted it to be a book. And so that really shaped how I was photographing and like, yeah, just knowing where I wanted the images to end in the end. I gave myself the challenge to take photos for 1 year and to document my transition for 1 year. But after 1 year, I felt like I needed to dig a little deeper, and I felt like there was more to the story. So I continued, and the book Puberty came out this April 2022, and it covers like all of the project from 2019, 2020, and a bit of 2021. So it's like about 2 years of my life as a trans person undergoing hormonal replacement therapy, specifically taking testosterone. And it's also about, you know, what we were all going through, like the pandemic and all of those things and how that affected my life is also a big part of the book. And I think that's interesting because it's a lot of different transitions that other people can relate to as well. And I like to think of transition as a theme beyond just like my trans body. And something else that I really wanted to incorporate into the book was seasons. So each chapter is divided by seasons, and I really wanted to look at nature around me and see how that's changing. And I feel like that really helped give a sense of, yeah, the time passing in the book. I can share the book, or if you want to get into questions, we can also do that.
Let's start looking at the work.
This is a PDF of the final book. Some of the images are a bit blurry, so my apologies about that. It's a low res version. It's a very big book, so it has 288 pages total. So we might not look at all of them, but we'll start here. This is the opening. For the book, I really wanted to have handwritten elements because from the start, I really wanted it to feel like a diary. And the way I ended up doing that was with an iPad. So I wrote all of the text on an iPad and then transferred those files to my computer, etc. I had tried scanning actual handwriting and all of that, but in the end, I felt like that was the cleanest way to do it. So these images at the start of the book are in the winter of 2019. And the way I organized the book is somewhat chronological. So some of the days might not be exactly in the right order, but overall it's like season by season. So here we have winter, That's where it starts. Go. And you can see that the images from that first little bit are very much like I said, pictures of me at home and very unstaged, very mundane moments. I also wanted, as you can see here, I wanted to add captions to the images, but I also wanted them to be full bleed, like take all of the space in the books as much as possible. So my solution for that was to write directly on the images. And that's what I did here as well.
Is that your actual house?
This is not my house, no.
Okay.
I feel like I like to play with reality a little bit, whereas like I'm just showing you what I'm seeing and kind of like how it relates to all the themes that
One
I'm
of
looking at.
my questions, I think is what role does fantasy play in your work,
Mhm,
and how does it as a theme to connect to your gender identity?
mhm. That's a good question. I think not so much fantasy, but it's more about play for me and playfulness. But I guess also I am creating a certain fantasy, and I think a lot of those images that are more kind of scenery and landscapes or still lives are to immerse you in that fantasy. And a lot of times it's more like if I see something, if I see a color, if I see a type of light that really inspires me, I'll photograph it. And then after the fact, I look at all of them and how they kind of read together. I was really looking at the flow of the images, the flow of the colors. We can kind of see that in this spread as well. And I always photograph colors that are actually there. That's a question I guess asked a lot, but I just try to bring it back in Photoshop to what it felt like, the saturation to my own human eyes versus the camera. It's always a bit more boosted. Uh, and yeah, just trying to take the viewer back into that moment. And I think that color is a really nice visual language to do so. So you can see this is like pre-pandemic 2019. I'm going to shows and birthday parties and all of that kind of stuff. And that's going to change a bit later in the book. Here I've got my peanut butter ramen recipe. That's actually the very last thing I put in the book. I had put it in at the very start and then I wasn't sure. And just as I sent the final book PDF, I was like, no, I need to put it in. So I added it back in. And yeah, here you can kind of see me playing with gender a little bit. I really wanted to play with hyperfemininity, and I think a lot of testosterone-based transitions are documented in a more masculine way, in a more minimal way. And so I wanted to go the exact opposite and really continue to play with femininity and play with bright colors and textures and all of that. Here I'm introducing the topic a little bit, talking about the first time I took testosterone on April 20, 2018. And talking about the process and how I thought that it was going to be like a really overnight kind of thing, but really it's been a much slower process and a process of becoming myself that's constantly happening and is happening for everyone, even if you're not transitioning.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Like, I'm curious, like, aside from the sort of like physical transformation and change when you started taking the testosterone, have you observed any sort of changes in your sort of emotional state or in sort of like your mental state that maybe were enhanced by the hormone?
Yes, actually, when I first started testosterone, and it's kind of interesting because I don't think about it so much now. It's been like 4 years, I think. But when I first started, I could really feel like it was making my brain just like completely feel differently. I remember for the first, I think, year of being on testosterone, I couldn't cry at all. And that's a really common thing. I could only cry like a little happy tear sometimes, but for the longest time, I couldn't cry out of sadness. And I had to like reteach myself to do that. And it really made me realize how much hormones do affect mood and things like that. I already had a sense of it because I had issues with birth control in the past where I was taking different birth control, and I could really feel like it affected my mood and my depression and things like that. With testosterone, everybody reacts to it differently. For me, I feel like it lifted depression and just made me feel, yeah, I don't know how to explain, like my brain just felt different, but now it's been long enough that I feel myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Here I'm talking about my tattoos. This layout here, I really wanted to give a sense of kind of the daily routineness of it and show how me doing my testosterone injection is part of that daily routine. Also, a big misconception. People always ask me if I have to do my T-shot every day, and I don't. It's just once every 2 weeks. So if anyone was curious about that, now you know. Some people do it every week, but I do it every 2 weeks. There's a lot of pictures of my cat in this book. I think she's somewhere behind me right now. There she is. And here I'm starting to introduce the outside world a little bit. You can see that the seasons are changing. Now it's starting to be spring. And yeah, and then it's another chapter. This one is my birthday from when I turned 26 at my partner's apartment. That's something else. Like I wanted to show moments of me as a trans person getting older and having happy times as well as the harder times. Okay, this part of the book, we get a bit more into fantasy here because in April 2019, I did a trip to Paris and then Iceland, and I incorporated that into the book as well. And this page is a bit more like routine-y, but after that, we get into more imaginary moments in Iceland. I did a series of self-portraits, kind of naked in nature. And I knew that I wanted it to be part of this project of self-documentation, but it also is kind of its own little chapter and standalone, where I'm naked in Iceland and looking at the trans body in nature and as a natural body, and also looking at Icelandic folklore at the same time a little bit. Do you have any questions about this part of the work or anything like that?
I wanted to ask you about color, and their importance to you, and in particular orange and red, especially like orange, because it's such a predominant color in the book, and you're almost, I think it's tied to your identity too. So I was thinking about what those colors represent and mean, and if there's symbolism to you. I know that you talked a little bit about like photographing. All the colors in the book are kind of found colors. They're not like, you're not like intentionally like photographing with colored light, but it's kind of like you're seeing it and capturing it. But like those particular colors are so, it seem tied to your identity. So I'm curious to that question.
Yeah, well, I started dyeing my hair orange in 2014, I think. Before that, I had blue hair, and both times I felt like just my hair is a big part of my identity. I really love it. I also feel like orange is the color of creativity. It's a really happy color, and I really like to surround myself with it. I think because my hair is orange and I'm doing self-portraits, it just ends up being um, introduced in a lot of the images. And I kind of learned to play with it from there. Um, I don't know if there's any deep meaning, honestly, with my colors. I really just go with intuition, and that's the meaning of all of them. Um, I think colors have a lot of meaning attached to them depending on what society you're living in, but there's also an innate, more like gut feeling to different colors that we can all feel different emotions when we look at them. So I really like to use color as an additional kind of visual language to photography, and yeah, just play with the emotions and play with the intuition of it. It's not so like intellectual or like thought out for the most part. It's really just how I feel.
And also with the pictures, like as you're exploring nature more and putting yourself more in nature, do you think, I'm curious, did you take only self-portraits in nature, or do you also like to just like photograph nature?
Yeah, I do a bit of both, and um, I always try to, if I'm photographing myself, I also like to take pictures of the environment I'm in. So not just what I look like, but also what I'm seeing is kind of part of the self-portrait. And I think too, just for the rhythm of the book, uh, that was something I was struggling with. It's like, how many self-portraits do I put in where it doesn't get repetitive, where it's not just like a picture of myself every single page. So yeah, I like to play with both, and I take a lot of scenery and landscape pictures, to be honest.
Have you uh do you know of a book called Outerland by Allison Davies? Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't think you would, but I think it's something you should look at because um, uh, it's this woman who photographed self-portraiture as sort of a space explorer, and so that they went around the world and photographing these very sort of like Martian and alien-looking landscapes. And some of these, this one in particular, "View in the Green Moss," reminded me of some of her images.
Nice. Isn't that person who shoots 5:7 color film?
Yeah, they do shoot medium format. Yeah,
I think I saw their piece recently at a museum, actually.
possible. It's probably not though, but I'll email you about it. I'll.
Okay.
But yeah, this is. I think this is for me. This is one of the really like most powerful pictures in the book, and I think it has to do with a certain vulnerability, um, and the way that sort of contrasts with it's like both a dynamic picture as far as the color and the contrast between the green and your orange hair, and at the same time it's not holding only that dynamism, it's holding this other kind of almost contrary emotion, which to me is like it feels very like vulnerable, and also like sort of the earth is protecting you in a way, or you're sort of like there's sort of this embrace almost,
Mhm.
um, and it's coming up from the ground and you're like merging into it or something.
Yeah, it was a very intense picture to take. Like all of the pictures from Iceland were taken a bit differently than the other ones in the book because they were taken from a little too far for my camera remote to work. So I had a friend operating the camera. So I was like directing them on how to frame it, and also modeling it at the same time. And I was naked and it was very cold when I took those pictures also. So there was a lot going on. It was very sensory and very demanding on a lot of levels. But I'm glad that I made the images. When I was making them, I wasn't even sure. I was like, oh, are these any good? But it's always like with um, a bit of time and a bit of perspective and seeing how people respond to it. I'm like, okay, there is something to these images. So I'm glad that they still resonate. This one here was the first day that I was in
That's
Iceland.
exactly what I was like saying, like you're just sinking into the earth.
Yeah, that one was really, I just remember the texture. When I look at those images, I just remember the texture on my body of like the rocks and all of that stuff and the wind.
What are you photographing with? Sorry to get all geeky.
I was taking pictures at the time with a Canon 5D, and
Okay.
now I use a Canon EOS R, which is a full frame mirrorless camera.
Oh, nice.
But most of my images are shot with a Canon 28mm lens. That's my favorite lens. It's like wide, but not too wide. And yeah, I just really like it. Here we have some sky.
And can you talk about the process of making the book and working with the designer and publisher?
Yeah, so basically the book, the first step was making all the images. And that took about 2 years, like I said. I got in touch with my publisher, Jennifer at Yalfi Press. I think it was sometime in 2020, like early 2020. And at that point, we knew we wanted to be a book. And it took about a year to really get a sense of like what format the book should be and how long it should be, that kind of stuff. Once we had a good understanding, my publisher and I, of what kind of vibe we wanted for the book, I started doing the layout, and I ended up actually doing all of the layout myself. I think because it is such a personal project, and I do have some background in graphic design. My dad is a printmaker and graphic design teacher, so I've been around that kind of my whole life. So I felt confident doing the layout and all of that. So yeah, I took all my images, I printed all the ones that I had selected as potential images to be as part of the project. And then it was a lot of back and forth, kind of playing on the floor with different order, transferring them to my computer. I was working with different mentors and sending them drafts back and forth and getting kind of their input on like what they thought was missing, what they thought was not necessary, etc. And yeah, I don't even know how long it was to do the whole layout of the 288 pages, but it was pretty long, honestly. I know I did all of 2020, 2019, and then I did all of 2020 after that. And once I had all of the order in, I started to look at the text. And so I pulled from diary entries that I had written, and then also started handwriting on each of the images. And that was a very long process as well, just kind of figuring out what do I want to say, what do I want to add to the images, and also making sure that there's enough like white space and space to breathe between the images. Yeah, and then the only thing I worked on a designer was the cover, and that I worked with Chloe Sheffy, who was an amazing designer. I had worked with her a couple times, and she had actually commissioned me to make some of the images in the book, which maybe we'll get to. And yeah, she made the cover. It looks amazing. I'm really, really grateful. That was the one thing where I was like, I want to hire someone because the cover is like the first thing someone sees, and I really want to make sure it pops. Yeah, there you can see. Maybe I'll show it after as well. But yeah, that was the process. After that, Vesti, my cat is like trying to get my attention so bad right now. Vesti, don't do that. There she is on the screen as well. And yeah, so I think we had the book ready, like the full mock-up ready in the fall of 2021. And then the book was printed in Holland by Wilco Art Books. And so that process for me, what it looked like was I did some test prints with the same type of process that they were going to be printing with a local printer that I work with in Montreal to get the colors right. And then I sent those prints to Amsterdam, or it's not exactly Amsterdam, it's like Amersfoort or something like that, where it's printed. And And yeah, and then from those test prints, I sent a selection of images like that had different levels of brightness to them so that they could see how they should look in relationship to one another. And I was able to source the same paper as well that it was going to be printed on. So that was really great. So I sent all of that to Holland, and then they did a proof and sent it to me and all of that. And the biggest thing after that was to raise the funds to make the book. It was a very expensive book to print because it is so big. So I did a Kickstarter with my publisher to raise the funds for it. It was a big learning curve for me. I knew how expensive it would be to produce, but I think I didn't realize like just how much with the cost of everything these days. So like 100% of the Kickstarter money went to getting the book printed. And even that didn't cover everything. So my publisher actually covered the balance of what we needed. But yeah, and then since then, it's just been like a rolling ball of ongoing things. Like the books arrived in the spring, my publisher shipped them all. And then I had a solo exhibit and kind of book launch in Montreal. And then I just came back from a solo exhibit of this project that opened at Photographiska New York Museum this past June. And that show is up until August 21st. So if anyone's in New York, you can go check out the exhibition there. I also premiered a video version of the project as part of that exhibition. So you can also see that at Photographiska. It's not really visible anywhere else right now. And what else? They also have a lot of copies of the book at Photographiska New York. So a hot tip if anyone's in New York. I also left some signed copies there with like secret messages in them. So go check those out if there's still any of them that haven't been picked up.
I like the
Yeah.
sound of that.
Yeah. So where are we at now? I think we're looking at fall 2019.
Go back one spread to the two. Yeah,
This one, yeah.
yeah. This is really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, this ended up being the cover of the book. I had sent a few options to my cover designer, and that's the one she picked, and I really liked it. Yeah, I took this picture in my home right before going to sleep. A lot of my self-portraits in the first couple of years are taken at night because I would just procrastinate all day on taking my daily pictures until it was nighttime. I had nothing else to do before bed, so it's like this one is like that too. And they're just like the last thing I do before I go to sleep kind of thing.
I feel like Vashti is a bit of a celebrity in this work too.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a lot of presence.
Yes, she has a lot of presence. Where is she now? I keep hearing her behind me.
Yeah.
She's sneaking around. Yes, there we go.
So do you see like, I mean, not that it needs to be named, but in the tradition of like photographic memoir and self-portrait, do you see this as sort of in the same vein as kind of you know, a kinship with, you know, from Larry Clark and Nan Golden to people working today?
Yeah, definitely. I was very inspired by Nan Golden, of course. I don't know Larry Clark's work as much. Like I know of it, but I never studied it properly or anything like that. But I think this work definitely takes in the tradition of Nan Golden's work and just that diary style in general. And this idea of like making your own life art is very powerful to me.
Mhm.
And yeah, just my main inspiration behind it was really to be able to tell this story from my own perspective because I knew that I could get to a much more vulnerable layer than you can if you're photographing someone else or telling someone else's story. So I think that was a really great blessing with the story is like it's mine and I choose when to tell it and how to tell it. And what I want to reveal, when I want to reveal it, etc. So it's a very empowering process. Yeah, Vashti's here. You can see Vashti here as well. I'm just going through this pretty fast, but hopefully you have the book at home and you can, take a longer time with it. I designed the book so that you can read it in one sitting, but you can also kind of like put it down and read it, over a couple of nights on your bedstand, kind of thing like that. And the book is available for purchase at Yaffe Press as well. That's the easiest way to get it. Or certain bookstores will have it as well.
Another question I have, and I don't know, I imagine this is a little less relevant because you're Canadian, um, but as trans visibility has become such a much more part of our culture, and especially at the insistence of trans people and trans youth, there's been quite a lot of backlash here, at least in the United States, with these, the bathroom bills, and now in Florida, the Don't Say Gay bills. And I'm just curious if you have done some thinking or have a sort of a response to sort of the politics that are involved with asserting, you know, a trans identity, and what sort of is, the sort of the in a way the fear that I think, that people feel from, like, people recognizing and acknowledging, like, who they are and their true selves, and for some reason it seems to again threaten sort of somehow what they see as some sort of natural defined order.
Mhm.
And their response seems to be to want to be, aggressively violent and aggressively, against, a more open and just the ability for us to, have more options and more ways of defining and seeing ourselves rather than less. And I'm just curious how you sort of see and all that that's happening in the context.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think you really touched on it. Like at the end of the day, to me, it's really fear-based. And so my work always aims to just come from a place that's really gentle and honest and as relatable as I can. I always just want to share my humanity, outside of just being a trans person, being a human person, and really looking at what ways can we connect with one another as opposed to in what ways am I different from other people. Um, so yeah, I mean, I feel like right now it's a really scary time, especially in the United States. And the most I can do is just share my truth and like share it from a place of love. And I think that really resonates with the work. So far, everyone's had a really, really positive response to it. I really wanted to write it from a place that like, you don't have to be a trans person to understand what's happening in the story, but also if you are, maybe you'll feel, connection. Um, and yeah, just like more open conversations and uh, just showing up for myself is like the most I can do right now.
Right. I love that you went to Mexico City, and like you must have just been like, because it's one of my favorite cities, and it's so, like, the colors there are just amazing. So you must have
Yeah.
just been inside yourself, like, I imagine.
Yeah, it was very surreal because we took this trip, my partner Nina and my friend Billy and I, to Mexico, and that was literally like 2 weeks before everything shut down, COVID wise in North America. So it felt, and like we didn't really know it while it was happening, but it just felt nostalgic like almost immediately because we got home and it was like, oh, now we're in quarantine and we're not going to leave our house again for a year. So yeah, it's definitely a very nostalgic feeling, but very beautiful colors. I would love to go back. I had a really good time there. And I actually was there on assignment taking pictures for the company Away. They're like a suitcase company. And they had a magazine at the time, which was uh, edited by the person who designed the cover of the book. So she had commissioned me to take these photos specifically, like this club she had sent me to, like places like that. So I think that's like a fun full circle moment, the fact that she designed the cover in the end. Um, yeah, so we get into COVID like right about now. After we got back from Mexico, COVID hit, and that's something too where it's like I started this project a year before that, so I never set out to document COVID, but I think it was, I mean, it's still happening, but it was a very important and marking time in history for a lot of people. So I'm glad that I was able to document it. And it's interesting because now I feel like there's a lot of like nostalgia for early COVID times in some ways.
Yes, it
Like
was
the
very.
government gave us money and we thought we had to stay home for 2 weeks and like, you know. But yeah, that's something too that I think is interesting is that because I'm telling that story that a lot of people can relate to, that adds another layer of like connection with the story where it's not just my story, it's like we all went through this to a certain degree. There's a couple questions in the chat. Is it okay if I answer
Yeah,
them?
please.
Okay. Someone said, what environment do you enjoy photographing the most? And I've been thinking about it, and I really like and photographing any place really. I always have my camera with me. It's right there, right next to me. I just like carrying my camera and taking pictures of anything that catches my eye, whether it's like in my house. I've taken a lot of pictures in my house, of course, but I love taking pictures outside. I love taking pictures of nature, um, people, just anything really. But any new environment is always fun to photograph. After a few years of taking pictures in my house, it definitely became more challenging. Like I was trying to find ways to make it feel new, and I still do. But yeah, at this point, I would say probably new outdoor spaces are my favorite to photograph. And someone asked, what is the role of post-production in achieving the colors and moods? So like I said earlier, I don't really add in colors that aren't already there. But what I do is I do boost the saturation and I do tweak the light and all of that stuff. And my goal when I'm editing or retouching is always to make it feel like it did to me. And I just play some music and get in the groove, drink some water, and just like meditate on each image. And I do spend a lot of time with each image. And I work on them over and over again. So I might edit it first time and then I'll print it and see how that works and then re-edit it and um, often boost the lightness and the saturation a little bit more every time. And yeah, I don't see my images as necessarily ever being done. Like if I'm gonna reprint it for a new context, I might rework it. And yeah, it's like always a work in progress. Yeah, but if anyone else has any questions, I'm just scrolling through the book and showing you guys. I really like this one. I'm doing a face mask in bed. I really like to put like a few more like kind of funny images in there too, and not taking myself so seriously all the time. Summer 2020.
Mm.
Yes, I started smoking weed again in 2020. The first year of the book, I'm not smoking weed. The second,
Who didn't?
yeah, exactly. It's like, what else was there to do, really? And yeah, I talk about here like kind of some routines that I have, which is like walking in the alleyways. I'm probably gonna go for a little walk after this, actually. And yeah, just connecting with the nature around me. This was my favorite willow tree. She's actually been cut down last year, which is very sad, but I still walk past her empty spot all the time. And yeah, I think in this chapter, you can see me going outside of the house a little bit more because I was going a little bit nuts from being inside so much. Someone asked, how much does a project like this cost for the artist? So it's really hard for me to answer that because this project has been so all-consuming and it has been very expensive. It has taken a lot of my time. Like I've dedicated myself to doing this full time, knowing that I'm not doing it for the money. That being said, especially this past year, producing the book and producing exhibitions for it and all of that stuff has been really expensive and put me in debt a lot because I feel like there's a lot of free work that's expected out of artists. But at the same time, it's my passion and I know that it has a really positive impact in the world. So I don't know. I'm just doing it because this is my life and this is my message that I want to put out into the world. But how much would a project like this cost? Honestly, like in the tens of thousands is how much I've spent on this project personally. So yeah, a lot of money. And I do work as a photographer full time. And I've applied for some grants here in Canada. We have a grant council system where artists can get like larger amounts of funding. So I'm hoping that I can get some of that to cover the next chapter of this project, basically. But yes, it is very expensive to produce this kind of work. And because I've been doing it every single day for years, there's a lot of costs, like just my time and energy in doing it. Of course, last summer I didn't work at all for months because that's just like I needed to get the work done. And like this past month, I didn't really work at all either because I was preparing for an exhibition. And yeah, I just sell prints of my work. I have a Patreon. That's like my main source of income. And I also started working with a gallery in Montreal and they handle all of my larger like signed prints and all that. So that's been really nice. And I also make income by licensing my images. So anytime like a magazine or an exhibition wants to showcase my work, they will pay me an artist fee or a licensing fee. And that's how I get a lot of my income back from this project. However, like I still feel like I spend more money than I make on it. Someone asked, do you have any essential items other than a camera and lens when you go out to shoot? I have a little tripod. It is right here. You can kind of see it here. I have this little tripod here. It's a travel one. It's a Manfrotto. I always use the Manfrotto tripods. They're just a really good quality, last me a long time. I think this is like the Pixie or Evo or something like that. And it just has like extendable legs. It's really good. I can put it on the ground. I worked with a taller tripod before, but honestly, I just found it really cumbersome, especially in indoor spaces, like small apartment spaces. So now I just work with this. And for the most part, I just keep it attached at the bottom of, like I keep my camera attached on it, and then it helps me get more steady shots and things like that too. And then I also have a remote, which is like I just point at my camera and it'll beep and take the picture. And I also have a mic, which I usually have on my camera. I removed it for my trip this past week. I haven't put it back, but yeah, honestly, just the tripod and the remote is the most important. And then my screen flips like this. And that allows me to see what I'm looking at from the other end. It's kind of looking right now, but something like that. But yeah, no, I'm very minimal with my equipment. Yeah.
You're taking each other's pictures there.
I'm very minimal with my equipment. I have one camera. I always use fixed focal lenses as opposed to zooms because I find that they have just a better image quality in general. And that's it. And then I transfer the images on my hard drive. That would be the other essential item is like some solid hard drives, and make sure that you always back up all your files. I always upload them on 2 different hard drives when I empty my memory card. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty minimal. I use ambient light, whether I'm outside or inside. You see a lot of colored light in my images. Let me try to find one. But yeah, the colored light in my image images is usually coming from light bulbs that I have in my house. I have all of my light bulbs are like LED smart bulbs, so I can change them from my phone to whatever color. And I also just have like lots of little fun lights around my house. And that's not so much a photographic thing as like a personal preference. I really like to be surrounded by colorful lights, and they make their way to my images. And yeah, now we're at fall 2020, and it's another little trip. I went to BC to visit some family and friends. I usually go there to the West Coast about once a year. And so I'm documenting a little bit of that. That felt really nice after taking pictures inside for the pandemic. Someone asked, you had mentioned posting this work on Instagram. Do you feel this is the best platform these days for getting your work seen by galleries, getting commissions, and getting your message slash art out there? How did getting your work seen path out for you? Instagram's a bit tricky. I think right now there's a lot going on with the algorithm and the work isn't shown to as many people as it used to be. Like that's definitely a thing. And it's a bit harder. Like you have to be very, very consistent with it to get good views, which I'm not always. That being said, I do know that most editors still look at Instagram as their main kind of research for new photographers or keeping up with photographers' work. So I think there is still a lot of value to it for sure. I've pivoted to sharing my work in a newsletter in the last couple of years. And what I do is I do a monthly newsletter where I share, what I've been up to this month and what my new work is, and if I have any press or any exhibitions or anything like that. I'm taking a little break from that for the summer vacation right now, but that's been really positive and I've had a really, really great feedback. And it's been great to kind of gather a mailing list. So anytime I have something, I can just email those people directly. And I also have, like I mentioned before, a Patreon, and that's where I share all my new work now. So it's kind of like my testing ground. Like I'll share new work and see how people on there like it. And usually whatever the most popular images are, I'll share those on my Instagram, like maybe a couple months later. But I really like having that space where it's like a smaller group of people and they give me their feedback and they get, the exclusive. So it's a win-win, really. But yeah, I think just like put your work out there in the most ways you can possible and just see what comes back your way. And also something I should mention is that I've been sharing my work online since 2007. And a lot of the connections that I have are people that I met online, like, in 2010, 2012, and they still follow my work and they end up being photo editors and things like that. So just don't underestimate the passage of time and don't underestimate just keeping a steady flow of communication, because you never know who's going to be following you and what they're going to be doing in 5 years. They might remember you and they might hire you then. Like sometimes it can take longer than you think, but sometimes it's really fast too. So just do it, share your work. Do you have a favorite time of the year to photograph? I really like photographing spring because of all the flowers. But with this project, I got really into taking pictures of winter, which I feel like, as living in Canada my whole life, I had a big, like, mostly hate relationship with winter. I was gonna say love hate, but like hate. And this book really helped me like force myself to see more beauty in it and appreciate the snow and all of that. And so now I do really enjoy taking pictures of winter too. Trying to get to some winter pictures. Here we go. Statement of the book. Yeah, last winter I got really into it, just like enjoying how the light reflects on the snow and all of that. So maybe spring and winter. Yeah, I like all seasons though. I've grown to appreciate that I have 4 seasons where I live. Yes. Yeah, so this is the end of the book. Even though the book ends in winter 2021, I still have continued to take pictures every day and video as well every day. So the work is continuing. I'm not sure yet what the next chapter of it is going to be called, if it's still going to be puberty, if it's going to be something else. Um, but I'm definitely still sharing my story and all of that. I really wanted to end the book on a hopeful note and an open-ended kind of note. So I'm just kind of talking about how the seasons keep coming and the challenges that each season has brought and new perspectives that have come with those challenges.
I have a
Um,
question.
hmm?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, Maybe it's a comment question. Just reading like a couple of times, you didn't really talk about it, but I saw it in the text where you talked about depression and being on
Mhm.
going on antidepressants, and I feel like that is in such contrast to the work, which to me feels very hopeful. It's definitely I see the work as generally more optimistic and um like your vision is definitely not dark,
Yeah,
but it's bright and open and airy and yeah, and it's like feels embracing and so I just be curious to hear you speak about a little bit how that contrasts with some of the internal feelings that you describe in
mhm. Yeah. I mean, I struggled with anxiety like my whole life. I've had a lot of health issues, which I talk about in the book as well, that have impacted my life in pretty severe ways. So I feel like that's kind of the background of all of that. And like, honestly, a lot of the stress that I feel in general is coming more from a socioeconomic place rather than like a gender place. And yeah, for me, it was important to still mention those aspects of life in the book. I also have like a diary entry where I talk about like colonialism and capitalism and all of the stress that comes with that. And because I really wanted to be a story that's told from like a perspective that's as holistic as possible. And even though my nature is to take really colorful photographs and really hopeful photographs, I don't want to diminish the fact that like there are other realities happening at the same time as well that impact all of that. And um, yeah, I don't know if that answers the
yeah,
question, but
it makes
it's all part of life, you know?
makes it seem like it makes it also feel like to me then that the text functions even as more important and is essential in a way because
Yeah,
it
totally.
rounds out sort of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think adding the text made a huge difference. And it took me a long time to figure out exactly what I wanted to say because I wanted to keep it fairly minimal. Like I didn't want to write tons and tons of pages, but still get a sense of like there's a lot of weird things happening in life, but also like there's a lot of beautiful things at the same time. And like, yeah, I can look at all of it at the same time. Um, yeah, that's the end of the book. After the images, I put in an interview with my friend Matthew James Wilson, who um, runs Forge Art Mag, and he also opened a space in LA called Heavy Manners Library, and they host a lot of workshops there and stuff. They have a copy of the book as well, and it's a library of all types of self-published things. Really cool space. I really recommend you checking it out. Um, this part, sorry, I need to sneeze, I think. It's not happening. Um, here it is. Yeah, so Matthew and I had a lot of different phone conversations over almost a year, and he transcribed all of the interview into text, and then I edited that and kept kind of the parts that were most relevant, and then retranscribed all of it by hand. And then my partner Nina also illustrated some little drawings of us and all the little doodles and stuff. I really like this part of the book, and I think it gives a lot of context and answers a lot of questions that people might have about making the work and a bit of the behind the scenes. I always like when there's interviews at the end of books, but I find that sometimes when it's just blocks of text, like my brain can't focus on it too much. So yeah, I did the opposite and made it very like visually stimulating so you can't get bored reading it. Yes, I have ADHD and I think you can really tell in those pages. But you know, I really love how they turned out. So yeah. Yeah, and that's the end of the book. And then after that, I wrote a lot of thank yous, like I have page after page of thank yous. And because there's a lot of people that went into making the book, even though it's mostly self-portraits. And then at the end, I also did the little copyright page by hand just to like finish it up and have it all match. And yeah, that's my book. Thanks for scrolling through it with me. Trying to get it back to the top. Yeah, I think it looks a lot better printed. So if you want to get the book, I recommend you get the book so you can enjoy it as a physical object. I guess we have a little bit more time. If anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to put them in there.
There's a couple questions popped up.
Yeah, let's see. I'm also putting the link to my Patreon. That's the best way to support me if anyone wants to join me on there. I also send monthly snail mail packages with new prints, and they're really fun. I love sending mail. Okay, let's see the questions. Can you tell us more about your relationship with your partner? Yes, my partner Nina is in the book quite a bit. We started dating like within the first few months of the project, and they show up for the first time, I think, in the spring 2019, something like that. I don't know what else to say. I love them. They've been really helpful with this project and really open to being photographed for it, which I really appreciate. And yeah, I think they're just very used to me having my camera around all the time now. So it's kind of part of their life as well. But they're an illustrator. They do really cool work. I'm going to link their stuff down here as well. When I started the project, we weren't dating, and then we moved in together and the pandemic happened. So yeah, I didn't set out to make the project like about having a relationship necessarily. Like the project was always more about what was going on with me, but of course they're a big part of my life and they're around, and so it was important for me to show that, and also to show myself as a trans person, like loving and being loved is really a positive thing to have in the world, I think. So yeah.
I love how that Nina becomes integrated into not only the work, but also like collaborating, you know, with drawing and like that feels like really like bringing them along.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you. Someone else asked, what would you say were the most important things you learned about the book making process? That's a tough question. I think I've been around bookmaking for a long time. And I think what I learned with it was just how much work goes into it. I'd made smaller books before, but this was my first time doing like a full monograph. So yeah, I think I've just learned to be patient with the work, and like especially when I was doing the layout and all of the handwriting, it took months, and it was just a very long process. And I've just learned to be patient with myself and know that like there's only so much I can do in one day, and perspective really helps. So a lot of times if I was just kind of not feeling it, I would just sleep on it and look back at it the next day. And that's what I do with all my photography, is really just like let the work sit. I really love letting my images kind of sleep for at least 6 months before I even look at them. And I get a better sense of the context the image was created in, like in my life, but also in the world, what was going on and how that can affect the meaning of the image. And yeah, I've really just learned to appreciate how images can develop more meaning over time. and the more I understand the context of it. Someone said, do you ever compare yourself to other photographers? Not so much anymore. I feel like when I was coming of age and sharing my work online, like on Tumblr and Flickr, I was definitely comparing my work to other photographers more. At this point, I feel like I know I'm very confident in what my vision is. And I really just appreciate any other photographer who's doing whatever work they're doing that resonates with them. I do look at the work of other photographers, of course, and like, I don't know, I'm inspired by them, but I don't really compare my work anymore, I would say.
That's not true.
Yeah. And also something that I always want to do with my work is to tell a story that no one else can tell. And that's knowing like there's a lot of power in that, and knowing that only you can bring your perspective. And anyone can do that, not just me, obviously. Someone said, do you avoid repetition in your work? Yes and no. I might take a picture of the exact same thing every day for like months or a year. Like, I really do like the idea of working the same topic over and over, if that makes sense, and really like dissecting it. And sometimes I might have an image in my head and I might try it a lot of different ways until I get it out of my system. So I don't avoid repetition when I'm making pictures. However, when I was making the book, I really wanted it to have a certain flow and have a balance between like the mundane repetition, but also bringing something new to the eye. So I was more mindful of it when I was doing the layout. But in terms of taking pictures, I don't avoid repetition. I think I love artists who work with the same topic over and over again. I think there's a lot of meaning that can be gained that way. And yeah, if you're interested in something, just take pictures of it over and over again. It's totally fine. Yeah. Any other questions before we close it out for the night?
Sounds like you have a nice walk to look forward to.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a little walk. The sun just went down. Earlier today, I took a really long bike ride. I was delivering a bunch of print orders in my city, and then I napped. And I think I'll walk.
I
And then,
love that image of you on the bike, actually.
thank you. Actually, Nina took that picture. A lot of the
Yeah,
pictures,
amazing.
I tell Nina to stand and like take the picture.
That's
So
good.
yeah, it was a hard one to get, but I really like it as well.
Well, thank you so much for just being open and sharing your story with us.